This episode contains spoilers for Uncharted, the movie, not the video game. That might come at a later time. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cinephile Gamers podcast. I'm your host, Bo Smith, and this week we are going to be taking a small break from Oscar movies right now. And I know that sounds kind of crazy since I've only covered 2.5 movies. I have King Richard that I've watched. I'm about to make an episode on that, but we still have a few things left to go as far as movies go. But I want to take a quick break, and we are going to be reviewing Uncharted, the movie that had came out in the last week or so. And this movie, it's going to be an adaptation from the video game, but it is a completely original story to it. It stars Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg, Antonio Banderas, Sophia Taylor-Ali, and Tati Gabrielle, and it's directed by Ruben Fleischer, who has also directed Venom and Zombieland for Sony as well, so a very trusted Sony director for this movie. Now, if you don't already know, Uncharted is a very popular video game series that originated on the PlayStation 3 back in the mid to late 2000s and has spanned multiple video games. I think there's maybe like 6 in the series, but 4 mainline entries with a few spin-off games as well. And it primarily stars Nathan Drake and Sully, Victor Sullivan, but he goes by Sully in the games, and he also goes by Sully in the movie as well. And so it is basically about these two treasure hunters that discover vast and lost treasures that are pretty famous historically, and they go on these big, epic adventures for it. And the movie does not stray too far from this either. In fact, I'll go ahead and get into the story. Like I had mentioned before, it's not based on any one previous video game. There's elements taken from the video games themselves, but it is a totally original story. It's kind of set up as a prequel of sorts to the original games. And of course, there are some liberties taken from the games in adapting it to the movie. Of course, Tom Holland is going to be starring as Nathan Drake, a very young Nathan Drake, I'd say like mid-20s. And going into the movie, that was going to be my biggest complaint, was casting. I mean, this movie had been in limbo hell for quite a while, and so you didn't know if it was ever going to get off the ground. And last year, whenever they announced, yes, they are making this movie and Tom Holland is going to be your Nathan Drake, a lot of people upset about that, myself included, just because from people who have played the game, and I've played part of 2, didn't quite finish it, but I will say really enjoyed what I did play for the most part. A lot of people went into this thinking, no, this is too young of a Nathan Drake, too young of a Victor Sullivan, so it's not going to be quite the same game or same movie that we want to see. But anyways, the story basically starts off with showing a little bit of Nathan Drake's past, where he and his brother grew up in an orphanage, just like the actual game did take place, and of course his brother is Sam in the movie as well. And then it shows how they are descendants of Sir Francis Drake, famous explorer, and of course they believe that this is their legacy to be treasure hunters and explorers as well. And so after you get that initial scene of the two of them growing up for a little bit, it moves on to the present day, where Nathan Drake is just a bartender, not really doing anything as far as treasure hunting goes, but he is a thief, and you kind of see that early on in the movie, how he's kind of a scoundrel. You don't really expect that from either Tom Holland or Nathan Drake initially, but Victor Sullivan, who is played by Mark Wahlberg, of course, notices it and is just like, hey, I think you would be excellent at this job that I have coming up. And Tom Holland's like, nope, I'm not interested. But he does leave clues behind so that Nathan Drake can go to Victor Sullivan's apartment. And you see that he has the map of Magellan, which is basically the treasure that they are hunting for in this movie, is the lost treasure of Magellan. And so they agree that they're going to be partners and they're going to go on this adventure together to find the treasure. So that's basically your premise of the movie. Now, I will say this movie does not waste any time at all. In fact, your opening scene is not even when Nathan Drake was a kid. It's later on in the movie when he's dangling out of a plane, and that's not even a spoiler for the movie if you saw trailers. It is right away you see him on the back of this jet that is flying through the air on these crates that are hanging on by these straps. And this is a great throwback to Far Cry 3 when you had to do this. And like I said, goes in right away, does not waste any time explaining a lot of things. In fact, once you even go on to the initial meeting between Sully and Nathan Drake, does not waste any time. They go straight into the adventure and kind of show what is to come. So yeah, that is something that I like about the movie going out. And I have to also say, the casting for this movie, I did like most of the casting. Tom Holland really sold it for me. Like I had mentioned before, I was a little bit worried since he was a younger Nathan Drake, and God bless Tom Holland. I know he doesn't want to be typecast as a teen heartthrob forever, but he has such a baby face. It's hard to imagine him being older than a college student or a high school student for some of these movies. But yeah, after about 10 minutes into the movie, I was sold on him as Nathan Drake. The writing is pretty good for this movie as well. Like, it is very quippy, very much like the video game counterparts. So whenever Tom Holland does his delivery for lines, it's very good. It very much reminds me of Nathan Drake in the video game. So I did fall in love with Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. Mark Wahlberg, not convinced as Sully. I do wish they would have picked someone that was a little bit older, someone who looked like they were in their 40s, maybe 50s for the role. I mean, if you know anything about the game, he's an older man in the games. He has a deeper voice, has a thick mustache, is a cigar smoker. You don't really see any of that except for in a post-credit scene in the movie. And sorry if that spoiled it for you, but that was also shown in the trailer. So I don't feel like I have reached spoiler territory yet. Mark Wahlberg, I do like him. I think he's an all right actor, but yeah, I was not really sold about it in this movie specifically. But if you wanted to name him someone else and make him an original character, I would have been more okay with that. Would have gone away from the Uncharted lore initially, but you know, he would have made it his own character, which he kind of did in this movie. So it's not going to be the Sully you expect from video games. Antonio Banderas plays the villain in this movie, whose name escapes me. Not that that's a bad thing. I just don't remember the name off the top of my head. And he seems like your run-of-the-mill villain for an Uncharted series. He's very menacing in his scenes that he's in, as well as Tati Gabrielle, who is also playing an original character for this movie. I really liked her as the henchman for Antonio Banderas, and she really makes the action scenes in this movie really intimidating when she's in them. Sophia Taylor-Ali actually plays Chloe Fraser, who is a character from the video game series as well. Looks like her and acts like her too, so I really like that casting as well. Thought she did a fantastic job in all of her parts in the movie, and she doesn't play a small part either. I mean, she's in it for a good size of the movie, except for maybe the initial first act, and then like the last 20 minutes of the movie, she's barely in it at all. So that's the casting for the movie, essentially. Now let's kind of go into the basics of the movie. This adheres to video game logic. The action scenes are not totally believable, but they're not believable in the video game either, like how he's jumping from container to container from the plane. It's not realistic, but it is like a fun, turn off your brain sort of action movie. So this really does adhere to video game logic specifically. Speaking of the action scenes, I really like the set pieces in this. I mean, the production of it is elaborate. I think it is fun too, especially the stunt work in this movie. And side note, I hope that one day the Oscars do recognize stunt work as a category for Oscars, because the stunt work in this movie is fantastic. There's not like that crazy shaky cam or action. It's very well choreographed, and it's great fight scenes. It's great movement from Nathan Drake's part when he's just jumping over a bar, or he's actually like evading enemies and like fighting them. I really enjoyed that. It kind of kept me on the edge of my seat and smiling throughout the movie. And since this is an adapted video game property, you have a few amount of references to the actual game itself, probably some I didn't pick up on since like I said, I haven't played through the entire series, but the stuff that I did notice I really enjoyed. First off, the intro with the PlayStation Studios logo I thought was really neat, and I don't know if they're going to be adapting any more properties like a God of War or anything like that, but it was neat to see all those things together, including the Nathan Drake in there. Right in the opening scenes where Nathan Drake is opening up his chest and looking over postcards that his brother had sent him after they separated, you get a quick glimpse of the Naughty Dog logo, which I audibly laughed out loud. I think I was the only one in the theater who did that or maybe even noticed it. And a really great part later on is after the plane set piece is done and he and Chloe Frazer are leaving and they make it to a vacation tourist spot, and you see people just playing on the beach, and as they're walking from the ocean onto the beach, you see a guy in a lounge chair, and as soon as he talks, I immediately went, holy Yahoo! That is Nathan Drake's actor, Nolan North, and that was just so crazy to me. I was like, oh my gosh. And I fanboyed a little bit. Mackenzie's like, what are you doing? And I was like, it's Nolan North. He's Nathan Drake. And of course, Tom, he said, what happened to you guys? And Tom Holland goes, oh, we fell out of a plane. He's like, the same thing happened to me once. And great throwaway line and great cameo print. So I really appreciated that. Okay, now I'm going to go into the rest of the plot and what happens in the movie. So if you have not yet seen Uncharted the movie and you want to, before hearing my final thoughts on everything and what happens in the rest of the movie, spoiler warning right now, go ahead, watch the movie, come back and listen to the podcast. One of the things that I also really did not like about the movie is while they are searching for the treasure, they go to Spain, and I love the set pieces in there like I had mentioned before. Tom Holland's really good, and that while they're in this club trying to discover the next piece of the clue using these keyholes with the crosses that they had acquired early on in the movie, he sees a couple of the henchmen and he goes like, oh, I know what you want. Sex on the beach, right? Trying to create a distraction. And then, of course, the henchman starts picking on him. And they, like I said, good action all around. But then it gets to a part in this sequence where they're relying on Sully to fit the last piece of the puzzle together in order for them to advance to the next area. And he's going in to where the key should be, or the keyhole should be. And it's in a Papa John's that has this mural that's glassed off. And while it's kind of funny initially, I just don't like the product placement. It took me out of the movie a little bit. I laughed, but I was like, I really wanted something much cooler. And this is kind of a shame because, it's being produced by Sony Studios and PlayStation, and they have a heap ton of money that they threw at this project. I don't know how much it cost to make the movie, but I imagine it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least the, 7-8 digit range. So the fact that it's being this huge fight scene is taking place in a Papa John's, it really does take you out of the movie, and I didn't appreciate that. But as Mark Wahlberg is fighting off Tati Gabrielle, he knocks her out, and he saves Tom Holland and Sophia Ali, and they eventually find the next clue, which is a map of where Magellan's treasure should lie. It leads into the plane sequence where Chloe Frazer is actually working for Antonio Banderas as well. And so as they're up in the plane, Antonio is going over his big dastardly plan. And what's funny is, as I was writing my notes on here, I was like, oh yeah, he feels like an Uncharted villain. Not more than 10 seconds later, Tati Gabrielle comes up right behind him, slits his neck, and kills him, and becomes the new main villain. I was like, well, I spoke too soon on that. But like I had mentioned before, she plays a great villain. She's very cunning and conniving in her character, and is, no pun intended, cutthroat to get what she wants to this treasure. And so that leads to the big plane sequence where you had saw at the very beginning of the movie, and just kind of a different point of view from everything. And whether you think this is so unrealistic or not, you kind of have to admit it's kind of fun in that sort of campy way. And so Chloe Frazer, of course, does not want to be killed next. So she teams up with Nathan Drake once again. And Sully has gone his separate way because they are no longer partnered together after Nathan Drake finds out that his brother Sam had died searching for the treasure with Sully. Not that Sully killed him, but he was a casualty along the way and did nothing to save him. And so afterwards, Drake finds out the coordinates of where the treasure is going to be. He deceives Chloe, and so she's sent the wrong way because he knew that she was going to double cross him again. And so as he sets out to find the treasure, he does find Magellan's 2 missing ships along with all the gold that he had stored away. Sully comes in behind him and they start looking for the treasure, but then realize that they were being followed by Tati Gabrielle's crew. And so the next thing that happens is she has these planes that are set to pick up the ships through this crevice at the top of the cave, and they fly them out of there. Sully goes up into the plane and takes out a couple of the pilots and starts guiding one of the ships away from where they're being transported to. Of course, the bad guys see it, and they start chasing after their plane carrying a boat after this other helicopter carrying a boat. It's kind of a funny sequence, but it's a really great set piece where they start swinging from one ship to the other, kind of like a Pirates of the Caribbean type movie. And there's even a Jack Sparrow quote in there too, which is funny enough. I had completely forgotten about that. But it's great action all around. And then you finally get to Tati facing off against Tom Holland in this epic showdown. And they realize that the boat is crashing because she had dropped anchor on a cliffside and it's keeping the plane from going forward. And of course, it's breaking off on the ship. And so Sully has to make a decision. Does he save Drake, or does he save the bag of treasure he had taken from the ship? That way he makes at least some profit off of it. Ultimately, he does come up in saving Drake, and then the ship breaks off with Tati going down in the water and it crushing her. Kind of to wrap up this little section, though, like I had mentioned before, I don't like Sully's character in this, the way he is portrayed by Mark Wahlberg, and the fact that he doesn't really care for Drake much either up until he has to make the final decision, the cliche final decision. And you never see this in the video game either, because Sully and Drake are, you're not seeing this, but I've got my fingers crossed. They're that tight. They're best friends and they are partners in crime essentially. And so I just don't like that. Oh, this is how I guess they bond, is him saving him and then apologizing that he never told Drake about his brother in the first place. So what's the overall consensus of this movie for me? I really think it's a fun action movie. Even being based off of a video game, it's semi-faithful to the original lore, and I think it's one of the better video game movies that has ever come out. That being said, if you are a diehard fan of Uncharted, I don't think this movie is going to be for you. Yeah, it's a younger Nathan Drake and Sully. It definitely deviates from some of their characteristics, and the fact that Sully is a different character from his video game counterpart, and some people may feel like that Tom Holland is just not the right casting for Nathan Drake. I mean, there was a few years ago when this movie didn't seem like it was going to be made. Someone came out with a fan movie and they got Nathan Fillion to star in the role of this like 15-minute fan movie. If you haven't watched it, go on YouTube and look it up. It's actually really good. It's got some fun third-person elements that make you feel like you're in a video game. And that's another point that I want to bring up. There's just some things that the video game kind of does better than the movie. I mean, if you haven't played it, what I would encourage you to do is play like the first 10 minutes of Uncharted 2, because it is a fantastic opening to any video game that I've ever played. And it's very cinematic. In fact, all the games are very cinematic in their feel, and that's what the game is really praised for, that Naughty Dog does well. So whenever you have the moments like the plane scene from Uncharted 3 being adapted into this movie, yeah, it's exciting, but you kind of feel like there's a greater tension whenever you play the video game instead. So you might want to play the video game over watching the movie. It's one of those things that, unfortunately, the video game did first, and it did a little bit better because you're immersed, and it's, in a way, you're involved with the video game and you're just a passerby whenever it comes to the movie. That's something that's going to be lost in this translation, unfortunately. I'm not really sure what you can do to immerse yourself better other than, I don't know, eventually, maybe 50 years down the road, make movies first person to where you control what's going on in the movie. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but that's the only solution I can come up with. But other than that, I would just go ahead and play the game if I were you, who's a big Uncharted fan. So overall, I think I'm going to give this rating a 8 out of 10. That might be controversial to a lot of people, but overall, I did have a fun time with this movie. I do have a few complaints about it, but really, those are overlooked. It's fun action. The set pieces are good. The stunt work is great. I really like Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, and hopefully, not that he's not a leading man already, because of course he's done Spider-Man and a few other movies, but maybe this can shake off the younger age vibe that he has been typecast in and do more older characters starting off, ones that are probably going to be maybe in their 30s or so, since he's getting close to that age anyways. So yeah, a lot of people are probably not going to agree with that rating, and I don't know what to tell you. This is what I just thought of the movie. I thought it was a very fun time. It's a movie that whenever it comes out on DVD, I'm probably going to buy it because it's a fun popcorn adventure movie that I feel like can be enjoyed anytime. I'm curious to know what you guys thought of the movie, and this is going to be a great time to tell you that if you want to have a discussion with me, instead of emailing me or getting on social media to talk with me, you can now join my Patreon page. I have finally made something because I don't think I'm going to get any sponsorships anytime soon. So if you are interested in becoming a Patreon page, I filled it with a lot of humor and a lot of what I thought was funny that is very me style. So I think you're going to get a kick out of it as well. You can go to patreon.com/cinephilegamerspodcast. You don't have to become a Patreon supporter. That is totally fine. This is a completely optional thing. I just thought it might be a good way of discussing some things, because if you are a member, you do get Discord access, and I might make an occasional other post as well that won't be included on the regular podcast too. So hopefully I can come up with a great enough material. We can get a good following, and we can also have some great discussions as well on Uncharted or any other recent movies that come out or video games that come out as well. Thank you all again for joining me in today's podcast. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next episode.